A lot of people in the Pathfinder 2e space see the free archetype rule as a given at most tables, and they usually play with an unrestricted free archetype where you can basically pick whatever you want from the extra feats that you are given. And I think that actually poses a bigger balance concern than a lot of people will often say if you have players that are min-maxers. And I want to show you some of the things that you can do with free archetype that you would really not want people doing, so that way you can know what to pick on your own free archetype characters, and also maybe think twice before taking it as a given in your next game. So first, let's just get on the same page for what free archetype does. Free archetype just gives an extra class feat every even level that can only be spent on a feat that has the archetype trait. And there are many, many archetypes in this game. I'm just gonna start scrolling through pretty quickly. A lot of them. You can now finally see the scroll bar appear. I'm doing this for a comedic effect. There's so many of them. And each of these are their own feat tree. And when you have these many different buckets that people can pick feats from, some of them are going to be pretty good. So let's start with one that's been in the game since launch. And you can see, of course, in the tabs up top, names of the things I'm going to talk about. So, Champion. And you might say, it's a multi-class dedication. How bad can it really be? Well, if you meet the stat prerequisites, which is not that hard, these 14s, by the way, are +2s. None of the archetypes have actually been moved to remaster rules because there weren't really dedications in the first book of Player Core 1. They didn't print a lot of them, so a lot of archetypes are just going to be legacy content. Don't worry about that. A lot of them are getting reprinted in Player Core 2, including Wrestler, which is on my list of things to talk about. So, what makes Champion dedication so great? Or Champion archetype in general? Because let me tell you, it's not Champion feats, that's for sure. Champion feats tend to not be that great until the mid to late game. So, what it does is it gives you armor training. And if you're something like a sorcerer, look, now you can play strength build and have armor. Oh, and if you want to be in the front line with that armor, why don't you get some extra HP for your troubles? And the free archetype rule says, hey, if they're sacrificing class feats as well, you might want to cap the amount of HP they get from feats like Champion Resiliency, but you can, as a caster, get more HP, armor, and then Healing Touch so you get out of combat healing plus an extra focus point, and then at level 6, get the Champion's Reaction. And for those of you that don't know what Champion's Reactions are, they are absurdly potent abilities. So I'm going to go into Champion itself, which is down here. I'm going to go into its causes, and I'm going to just read off Retributive Strike, which is one of the Champion reactions you can take. Trigger. An enemy damages your ally and both are within 15 feet of you. A pretty restrictive trigger. You protect your ally and strike your foe. The ally gains resistance to all damage. By the way, this resists every damage type separately. Resistance to all damage. If you get hit by some fire damage and some slashing, it'll resist both. So if you have resistance 5, get it for 6 fire, 4 slashing, you're only taking 1 fire damage. All the slashing goes away, 5 of the fire goes away. It's good. And that triggering resistance is 2+ level. And if the foe is within your reach, you get to make a strike against it at no multi-attack penalty. And you might go, wow, that's a cool once per encounter ability. But there's no limit on how often you can use it. It's whenever you have a reaction. And casters tend to not have very good reactions now, do they? But now you have a caster that is able to protect their ally, and then, maybe they apply a debuff. Maybe they let their ally step around. Champion reactions are good, and there's an archetype that's giving them healing and tankiness and everything else they could want. So, champion dedication is very good, but having one character with champion dedication probably won't change your encounter balance all that much. But if half your party has champion dedication, and no matter who you attack, you are triggering 2 different paladin reactions, you're gonna get soured on it pretty quickly. So, having a lot of champion reactions in a group just makes it so that you attack the players and you feel like you're just giving them an extra turn for hitting them. That's just how it goes, for the poor monsters going into the free archetype party. So, yeah, champion is a very good archetype. And even if you're a class that already has armor, being able to get another way to get free strikes off is really good for just about every single martial class, because champion only gets that ability, and it's fair because champion normally doesn't have any way to bolster their damage heavily. But if you imagine a raging barbarian able to throw out the retributive strikes, that's scary. And then, maybe you don't want something defensive. Maybe that's like a little bit too, situational, I guess. So let's talk about Psychic, who can give you a bunch of extra damage. Because what they do in all of these words here is they give you an extra skill training, sure, and a special cantrip from the Psychic class that's just like an upgrade version of a normal cantrip. And so it comes from the Conscious Mind subclasses because all the multi-class things are tied to their original class. A lot of people go here for Tangible Dream. And mind you, they have to pick one of these standard Psych cantrips, but that is not why Psychic is on this list. It is on this list because of Imaginary Weapon. And you go, okay, why are you hyping this thing up so much? And well, it's because of this amp ability here. If you spend a focus point while casting the Imaginary Weapon, you can make 2 Imaginary Weapon strikes. So it's 2 free strikes from this cantrip, which, sure, it's an attack roll cantrip. How good can it be? Now it's a focus spell, so sure. Each against a different target, sure. But both are at no multi-attack penalty. The only issue is, for every 2 levels you gain, the amount of damage this thing deals per strike goes up by 2d8s. So if you do the math on this, it gets very damaging very quickly. If you are level 9 and using Imaginary Weapon, you are dealing 10d8 per target. And if you are something like a Magus, because Magus has a lot of things that synergize with attack roll spells, notably their ability titled Spell Strike, which lets them use martial accuracy and put on a 2-action spell to then strike with it and deal the full damage of that spell plus the full damage of the strike. And then they can use stuff like the focus or the true actual spell Sure Strike. I fumbled on my words a bit there, but you got the idea. But, that's only single target. And like, how bad can it really be if it's a single target ability, you're losing one of the things off of it? So like, really, it's a good thing that Magus has no way to make it so that their Spell Strike hits several targets at once, at a feat that they can get immediately after the Psychic archetype gives them Imaginary Weapon. It's a good thing that is not a thing they have and isn't titled Spell Swipe, which lets you attack an arc and enact your spell against everyone you hit, which lets you make a spell strike but roll separate strikes to attack 2 creatures, each of whom must be within your melee reach and adjacent to each other. And if the spell could affect 2 or more targets, your spells affect whichever foes you hit, not just the first target. So, as a reminder, Amped Imaginary Weapon can have 2 targets. And if you're using a weapon that has a sweep trait, its bonus applies against both targets. This is, quite frankly, an absurd thing to do. It's a crazy amount of burst damage to just throw out of nowhere. And from Psychic, the archetype, this dedication feat gives you a focus point. You can then go in and get its basic spellcasting to get more slots for Sure Strikes, and then you can get Imaginary Weapon and get out of the archetype. That's how people use this thing. They just use it as a way to get imaginary weapon for things like their magus. But people knew about the magus tech. That's not something I'm like going to bring too much more attention to. I'm going to bring it to the attention of, you know how many classes there are in this game that get automatic scaling with spellcasting proficiency? As martial characters that have high defenses and already want to be in melee? The answer, it's more than you'd think, because the champion, the ranger, and the monk all have a way to automatically scale because they're focus point casters. So they have decent spell accuracies, and if they're investing in either charisma or intelligence, they can then use these psychic focus spells at a very high accuracy. And for champion in specific, who normally does not have burst damage potential, suddenly gains this option that greatly diversifies what they are able to bring to the table. Because now early in the fight, they kill somebody out of initiative order, and they make it so the rest of the people cannot play the game by denying their damage. So now champion becomes like a one-stop entire party, which is absurd and becomes very, very easy due to free archetype. Because normally, getting the into the psychic thing and then getting the imaginary weapon afterward takes 2 class feats, which is a tall price. But for champion, that's not even like a price if there's a free archetype involved, because they're still getting their primary class feats. But, you know, maybe you don't want to have actives and you just want to have something from a passive. Like, you know, a skill that automatically will become legendary. Because, you know, if you have so many feats, if you have too many activated abilities, they start to compete with each other. Because, like, if you have 10 ways to spend an action, you're still only able to pick 3 of them per turn. But there are some archetypes that have a lot of power budget in passive abilities, in reactions, and other things that are just kind of on your sheet and just exist there, not really requiring your character's action economy. That's one of the things that makes champion archetype so good. It's a lot of passives. And in a free archetype game, you already have a lot of actives from your class or whatever, and then you can get more actives from an archetype and you can be overloaded with things and not be able to use all of them. So in a free archetype game, you should just be grabbing every passive you see, even if you think it's not that great, because eventually you will find ways to burn your actions anyway. There will be feats that are just so good you're taking them and you're using them often, and all your passives are just kind of there, always giving value. So now you're able to use more feats per fight. That's just a suggestion I have. You're probably not evaluating passives strongly enough in a free archetype game. So getting this legendary in acrobatics, or these legendary in skills automatically, Dandy does very similar stuff with how it can bring a bunch of skills up like a proficiency tier. Both of these kind of do the similar thing, and these are considered more fair archetypes. They still increase skills and give passives and stuff that very much helps you. And a lot of people actually take Acrobat later in a character's career, after they finish something like Psychic or Champion, get everything they really want, then splash to Acrobat just for this dedication. And just to get another legendary skill, for free. Dandy, I already mentioned that it gives more skills. It can give a recall knowledge on any topic skill, and then it just has a bunch of interesting skill feat passives that can really take over a game out of combat. Because I really want to put emphasis on Party Crasher, which does require Master in Society, but it just says if there's an event that you know about and it has an attendance list, you just take 1d4 hours and no check, you get tickets for the party. Period. You might need to work as like cooks and pretend to be something for a little bit, but you're in. And this is just like a skill feat that you can pick up once you have this archetype. And then you're just, boom, you get the things up the proficiency tiers, maybe take just like a Gossip Lord to fill up the slot, and you can get out of this archetype pretty quickly because of the amount of skill feats involved in it. You can really flicker between a lot of archetypes and take a lot of abilities that are pretty overtuned. Medic is kind of the king of doing this, where it gives you the increase in a skill for battle medicine, lets you heal more with battle medicine, and then gives you a way to cheat on actions to battle medicine, so you have more rooms to use more of your cool abilities that you got from free archetype. From there, you take another skill feat at the level 4 from either Holistic Care or Treat Condition, and then you get out. Or well, I guess you have to take Treat Condition first, but like, you can then get whatever skill feats you want from this, you just get the Treat Condition, you meet the requirements, and you then go splash directly into something like Acrobat. And you just kind of bounce between a bunch of different archetypes, getting a bunch of random skills along the way that are all passive benefits, while having action compression abilities from each archetype. That is a ridiculously powerful thing to do. Versatility is a form of power in this system. So, when you are thinking about if you want to include free archetype in your game, it will make more powerful characters if your players are seeking to abuse it. And believe me, if I'm a player in your game, I am abusing it, period. Because Wrestler abuses it, and this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna play a Wrestler. It's how it's be. So I actually want to talk about Wrestler now, because Wrestler dedication does everything I was mentioning could be problematic. It's a laundry list of passives. It gives you extra skill feats, gives you extra skill trainings, gives you random ways that you can have lethal strikes, and then you get a bonus to Fortitude DC against several things, which is really good. It gives you access to something like Combat Grab, so that you can just get the grabbed condition off more often as a grappler, target different defenses, really, really strong. And then you can take whatever from the other feats. Suplex is one of my favorites because it's another way to apply prone. So now you can ignore reflex and fortitude if you want and still get the prone grapple locks going, which is hilarious. And then you can get like whirling throw and start splashing to a bunch of other archetypes if you so wished, or keep on taking random wrestler feats. And whirling throw and suplex in the crowd, they fall into a category of things that I like to call situational actions. You don't really want to use suplex right after you grab somebody because then you have multi-attack penalty. It's for if they choose not to escape your grapple, you then get to do the suplex because you'd release them at the end of that turn anyway. And situational abilities are also much stronger in free archetype scenarios because you have more actives, so you should be investing more into things that are only good in specific scenarios because you'll have the normal scenarios basically covered. Because in a normal scenario, you're just going to be, spamming out your combat grabs, spamming out like a basic strike, whatever your main class is doing. And then if the time comes where one of these feats is incredible, you then have it. And so instead of being constantly good, you're now good with an occasional spike of excellent, which is stronger. So versatility is a form of power. Having access to more abilities will make characters directly stronger if they're picking abilities that do things. And if you're going to restrict characters to abilities that don't matter, why would you do it? And now, I want to add the disclaimer for my massive disclaimer before. Free archetype is still fun. It lets you explore more character concepts than you would normally see in an average game of Pathfinder 2e. However, I do think that needs to be stated that if your players are looking to abuse it, it will be a lot of extra power budget. But that being said, I think there are a lot of archetypes that just kind of don't do that much and are really kind of flavory. Because if you look at something like, I don't know, I'm just going to scroll through. I remember that Herbalist was a good example. Herbalist would just kind of let you use various things to make antidotes, anti-plagues, various healing items. And yeah, it makes you get this extra skill proficiency, but its feats don't actually do that much in terms of giving characters extra power. Linguist is another one. There are dedications and archetypes that are really flavorful, but don't give a lot of power that you'd never be able to justify in class feat slots. But there are some archetypes where it's basically just like letting characters really dip hard outside of their given niche. So you can use it for games where you have a smaller, more controlled player count, and then let them build more versatile, interesting characters. Otherwise, I'd heavily curate and restrict a free archetype list if I'm just running a generic game. If you want to run a high-power fantasy romp, then this video probably sounds like, that sounds sweet, let's do that, in which case, more power to you. That's one of the games I'm running right now, and it is a lot of fun. I just need to make sure that I'm throwing slightly higher level creatures at the party, which is perfectly fine, I can do that. It does have a different feel than generic Pathfinder though. Games with free archetype tend to be a bit wackier because characters are splashing into wackier, weirder abilities more often. So there are reasons to not use free archetype that are very legitimate. I'm still going to use free archetype in like half my games, and I'm more going to use it when it is thematically appropriate, and when it's not thematically appropriate, I think I prefer the tactical element and the hard choices based Pathfinder forces on players, because I want to set up my rules so that I'm making my players make as many choices as possible. But hey, that's just my thoughts on this. I just wanted to simply make you think a little bit more about what types of variant rules you want to use. Because I see a lot of new GMs feeling like they have to run free archetype to get the full Pathfinder 2 experience, but for me, the Pathfinder 2 experience is having to make hard choices at character creation. It is having to make hard choices in combat, and I think you can lose some of that if free archetype is involved. So, with that, I'll say have a good one.